You know that I've been actually waiting for you. And I know that I'm not the only one who's waiting. I know there are many team members, leaders, organizations who are waiting for your leadership, who are waiting for you to be the role model, who are waiting for you to change the game. Because you know better than I do that Agile is not the tools or the frameworks, but it's a mindset. A mindset that is mainly fostered by leaders. So that's why I'm here today, to call upon you to lead the way. Because I guess you know how many of the Agile transformation programs fail, don't you? Yeah, how many? What do we say? Half? 90? Yeah, 70. It's exactly the same number as any other transformation process, yeah? 70%. Because behind every transformation process, the key bottleneck is what? Why do they fail? Yeah, I'm a coach, so I don't talk a lot. I just ask questions. So you're on this time. Why do they fail? What do you say? Change. Yeah, they don't change. There's no change. Yeah, then you come with your sprints and your flow processes and the workshops, and they're like, no, we're not doing this here, right? I just spoke with Maarten in the taxi here, and he worked for a big corporate organization. And they wanted really to work agile, but they don't want to use yellow sticky notes. We only have gray sticky notes here. Yeah, but the gray sticky notes don't stick. Doesn't matter, then we just don't use the sticky notes. Oh, it's such annoying. What else? What else is why they fail? They don't want to change. One more? Sorry? And lack of commitment. Yes, it takes a hell of a lot of willingness, but most importantly, it takes so much courage. It takes so much courage to change a traditional, if I also may say so, often masculine organization to change towards, now we're talking about an agile organization. It takes a lot of courage, and you know why? Because you are in the midst of a traditional leadership model that isn't valuing yet a different kind of leadership. That's why it's difficult. Okay. I think it's this one, is it correct? Yeah. Now, you see something interesting here. I think you all know the phrase culture eats strategy for? Thank you, for breakfast. Meaning you can employ the best agile strategy. You can have the best consultancy firms in your organization, bringing the best of the frameworks, the best of the knowledge. But if your culture is not supporting to these frameworks, tools, work process, you are doomed to fail. And who influences culture? Leaders do. Culture is nothing else than the way we work around here. And agile is a different way of working around here. So leaders determine a company's culture. Now, this is a nice picture, isn't it? Yeah. Organizations that have strong, agile cultures, they have, no surprisingly, one thing in common. They have what they called in this research post-heroic leaders. Now, I'm counting on that that's you. Post-heroic leaders. Did you ever heard of that phrase? It comes from the, what does it say? Third annual State of Agile Culture Report. Post-heroic leaders. Of course, I'm going to share what those elements are, but I want to hear from you. What do you say would be a post-heroic leader in this context? Can you name some competences or traits of this post-heroic leader? What would you say? Just shout. Vulnerability. Okay, thank you. What else? Up front here, what would you say? A post-heroic leader? No idea? Do you know a traditional leader? How that one looks like? What does a traditional heroic leader looks like? What do you say? So everything you, I assume, you find annoying in your company, yeah? Everything you irritate. That's the heroic part. What's an heroic leader? Order by rank, order and command and control. Exactly. Look at my stripes. Yeah. 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 Lots of empathy, collaboration. Yeah. You know what? Actually, it are exactly the same traits as we already know for a very long time with great change leaders. Post-heroic leaders have the same traits as leaders that are very well equipped to lead transformations. Now, McKinsey did a lot of research around leading transformations. So I wanted to share a bit more on that. Studies by McKinsey have shown that there are a few leadership competences that are very needed to lead transformations. Now, in your world, intellectual stimulation is what Agile calls encouraging experimentation and systemic thinking, which is applying different lenses to look at a problem, yeah, so you understand the unintended consequences. Yeah, so that's the first competence you would need, intellectual stimulation. Next, providing inspiration. That's also clarity of intent. Then, the participatory decision making. I've heard several speakers already talking about the importance of collaboration. Yeah, that's this. About you have the onion and you have your stakeholders and your collaborators and your team. This is creating, co-creating processes. Creating expectations and rewards, which means focusing on value. Developing people, which is more about empowering people, yeah, to set them up for success, to set them up for delivery. Fostering a feedback culture, I often hear, is also in developing people. And the most important one, I would say, being a role model. Being a role model and promoting agile ways of working. Now, how many leaders in your own organizations or organizations you work for you find being a role model? Hopefully you have a few. Now, there has been some research done. How many leaders do we see role modeling these qualities? When asked the question, our leaders role model agile behaviors. Before I show the numbers, what would you say? What would you say in your organization? How many leaders role model agile behaviors? How, in percentages? 50%, all of them, none? Yeah, yeah, around 20%. Yeah. Or some clients you work for, all the way in the back. How many leaders? Approximately half of them? count. 25. Okay, okay. Now, here comes it. When asked the question, our leader's role model, agile behavior, 97% of the board members say, yes, we do. Yes. And then 74% of managers, oh, yes, definitely role modeling. And then you end up with the team. So you have the engineers, developers, product owners, scrum masters. Now, of course, these numbers, you could laugh about them if it wouldn't be so sad. Because if only 2% of the people in the delivery feels that the way they have to work is being role modeled by the others, that's really, it's sad, it's devastating for the people working there, it's devastating for the organization. What this number exposes is that there is a critical disconnect, and it's rooted in how most organizations still operate from the heroic leadership model, the more traditional, or you can call it old-fashioned, or you can call it non-agile, whatever you want to call it, but we all know how it feels, right? We know what it looks like. And though leaders perceive themselves as the agile role models, their teams don't see it that way. Because when leadership remains stuck in more top-down, command and control mindset, it's not just the agile transformation that fails, but it's actually people that suffer. Now, do you know what happens to women and men, by the way, that navigate these environments, that you navigate the environment to succeed, navigate the environment to survive? We adapt. That's what we do. And with adapt, I don't mean the positive kind of adaptation that you talk about in Agile. I mean the kind of adaptation that means more of coping. You develop coping mechanisms. And with those coping mechanisms, you're losing exactly the one thing that makes you that post-heroic leader. Adapting to the system, then it's so hard to be the role model and to change the system. So that's why I'm here today, to call upon you to be the role models, because if you don't, who else will? We have to be the ones. But you know, and I know what it takes to role model agile behavior, or to role model a different kind of behavior in an organization which is set in an heroic leadership model. It takes a lot to not to adapt to the hierarchy, not to adapt to the power play, not to adapt to being one of the guys, not to adapt to command, control, to stop really playing the game and to start changing the game. It takes a lot. Now, my own career got off in a rocketed, I would say. So I started as the youngest consultant in one of the big 5 consultancy firms. And then the firm paid for my master's degree at a private business school. And then I was the youngest one in the company at the age of 29, working for the board of one of the largest energy companies in the Netherlands, now Vattenfall. And when I was 30, I was assigned to lead the cultural change. And with culture change, we mean transforming leaders, being responsible for the leadership development of the top 200. Now, despite my early success, it was a hard job. And you know what the hardest part of the job was? Not them, me. The hardest part in leading cultural change was dealing, I would say, outgrowing my own coping mechanisms. Because I had grown in this system and I had learned, obviously, to play the game very well. That's why I got there. And now I was assigned to change it. But how do you change something that's also ingrained in my own brain? Actually, not only just from the 10 years of my working experience, but from hundreds of years where mostly men dominated all influential decision-making roles. If it is business, politics, governments, academics, doesn't matter where, yeah, religious, everywhere. So for the past hundreds, I would actually say thousands of years, yes, since the rise of the father religion, but let's not go there. So since the past thousands of years, we have seen an image of what leadership looks like. And in my own mind, in all of our minds, it is ingrained. So when you want to change culture, as I wanted to do, I first had to learn how to change from within and outgrow my own coping mechanisms, my own ways of working in this environment. And of course, that's what I hope also to do a bit with you. Because we must really see, in order to bring Agile and to help others work from a more Agile mindset, you really have to understand how this traditional or heroic culture leadership framework, how it sets within you. You have to see your own coping mechanisms so that you can begin to shift your approach. If not, we will only repeat time after time what's already there. Okay? Now, and here comes the great part. Because you know, there is a specific group of people working in your organizations that already have dealt for quite some time with trying to be themselves, lead with more authenticity, being seen as a different kind of leaders than the traditional ones. You know who I'm talking about? Maybe a group of people that have already led the way for showing something else is possible. A different kind of leadership model is possible. Who? Women! Thank you! Yes, of course, there's so much we can learn from women. Really. And I must say, we haven't had an easy time staying so authentic to ourselves. Really, it's hard work. But we have found ways within that culture to lead differently. Not only differently, to excel. In that same research McKinsey did, they've asked thousands of employees if the manager was female or male, and if he or she explicitly showed certain kind of behaviors. And then they did some statistics and this picture came out. What the beauty is here, that in 4 of the most important competences for leading change, women leaders showed in their day-to-day management more often these leadership qualities. So you would suggest that there must be a lot of female leaders in IT, aren't there? No, no, not just in IT. No, they're not. Yeah. And it's not because they're not good enough or that they can't be found. It's because when you work in an heroic kind of culture, the lens through which your qualities are being seen or being valued or being evaluated is from a different kind of lens. So, how women have dealt with that is that they have reflected a lot. They did a lot of introspection to find ways to not be burned down or moved aside. And by the way, your country is doing relatively well, yeah, despite the rest of Europe and the Netherlands and the US. But women invest a lot of time in developing unique strategies. I would more say to really value themselves, to really lead authentically. And they paved the way for a more agile and human-centered leadership culture. But it's not easy. It's not easy. This is done of my own research that I did in the Netherlands, because McKinsey and Lean In, I'm not sure if you ever heard of the reports they're doing around women in the workplace. They do global research on okay, what happens to women on the workplace. I wanted to know how it was specifically done in the Netherlands. So I did my own research in 22, and this is what I found out. Especially that there was a big difference for women who were working in organizations with more men in leadership positions. We call that male-dominated leadership teams, which also means male domination in decision-making, in power, in where do we invest in, etc. So here's the challenge. For post-heroic leaders, and I would also call women leaders, most of them, in a heroic dominated world, that despite their potential and resilience, they find themselves struggling, yeah? To be seen, to be heard, to be valued. So 35% of women in the Netherlands working in these organizations say, yes, I personally think or see other women in my environment leaving the organization. Now, I think that's also just true for people that love to work agile, but find themselves yeah, in those traditional models. Now, some alter their careers, but a lot of them also just lower their ambitions. Okay? Now, why is that? That's because, despite all good intentions, most leaders still value masculine and the heroic traits, yeah? And that often leads to a sense of, I don't really belong here, or I have to be different, or I don't fit in, and questioning yourself. And the reason that so many women leave the organization not just has to do with not being seen or not being valued or not getting the opportunity or there's no flexibility or whatever. No, there's something much more demeaning going on underneath the surface, which is very hard to see for people if you're not on the receiving end of it. And that's called microaggressions. These are numbers in the Netherlands. I assume you think, or maybe you thought, the Netherlands is quite, normal, healthy, liberal, free country. Yes, we are. This is not just the Netherlands. The same is true for the McKinsey and Lean In study. I bet the same is true for a lot of IT firms, for a lot of integrators, for a lot of consultants, for a lot of big corporates. What you see here is what happens to women in the heroic traditional leadership model, heroic cultures. And for every percentage you see here, 35% of women who get to speak less often or shorter, you have to understand that on the other end, there are people speaking more. Yeah? Less being taken less seriously than men. That pregnancy is unfavorable for the career of a woman. On the other end, there's a partner for whom his wife has unfavorable career. Then the sexist or sexual jokes that are being made. Especially women in leadership positions get being addressed with girl, gal, everything to diminishes her power. Being just on your appearance rather than your quality, do you know how much time we spend on what do I have to wear today? Well, can I do the same dress? Do I have to do it all over again? Just, white shirt, blue trousers, finished, done, go. Love that, would have loved that. And then something that I think is very important also to notice, and I know no one really likes to talk about it, but we do need to talk about it. And that's the number of the sexual harassment that takes place here in the European Union. That from the age of 15, 55% of the girls and women mention that they have been sexually harassed. Women that work in top positions and higher management have said that it happens, 75% of them have experienced this. And of that group, 32% was on the work floor. So it has to do with a boss or a colleague or a client. Do you have any idea what it does to the self-worth, the self-confidence of a woman when she experiences this? It makes it so much harder to really be in front of a group, to really take the lead, to take risks. If those microaggressions, if you have been signaled every day in a very subtle way that you are worth less. But of course it was a joke, right? Yeah. So just laugh about it and don't make it too big, otherwise you're that angry feminist. Now, this is also where we need men to step up more. I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm here not just to talk about women, but just for you to know. That's why often when you see be an ally, it's so much easier for men to speak up when they see these microaggressions taking place than for a woman to step up. Because if you have to be the one the whole time to mention it, it gets really boring. So there's one thing that men can do so much more, and I was hoping on this agile community because you also want a different kind of culture, the culture that's set up for success. Yeah? And women can bring that culture with you, for you. We can do so much more together if we have men to address to each other and to their bosses what is acceptable and what's non-acceptable behavior. This is how culture changes. It changes because of us setting boundaries, calling out for what's not acceptable, helping each other to thrive and feel safe. We can do really so much more than we think if we stop waiting for others to change the game. Do you know the song of John Mayer? Yeah, Waiting on the World to Change. What is this song? We just keep on, we feel like we don't have the means to rise above and beat it. So we keep on waiting, waiting for the world to change. The means is within us, it's within you, it's within you. The means to change the system to a better, more thriving culture is within us. As long as we stop adapting to it, yeah, and start changing it. Now, this is what I always show the women that I give keynotes to, that they understand that there's, and I want to show it because men, all people, we all have coping mechanisms to deal with traditional cultures. And these coping mechanisms, they are, if you outgrow them, then you can also really become more of a change leader and an agile change leader. So for the women, one of the strategies is becoming one of the guys. Yeah? Now you all know what's that like, guys, right? You know what being one of the guys means. It means you're very goal-oriented. Yeah, you focus on winning, on the competition. Yeah, women who model this behavior, they don't talk about women's issues. We don't like to talk about it because what if you are being seen as a woman? Yuck. In this system, that's not a prey, okay? You want to be one of the guys. You don't want one that has less power. So you're focusing on your career, maybe some more degrees. Yeah, at the top of the corporate world, you find them a lot as CEO and in politics. Now, they're often stereotyped. Yeah, you're either labeled as bitchy or cold-hearted, hard, very pushy. Yeah, I was always very pushy. Okay. But also direct, straightforward. Yeah, and of course, she holds her own like a man. What's in the language, right? Okay. Now, there's also another side. What if you don't have those more natural, I would say, masculine traits? Yeah. By the way, there's no wrong and right here. Okay. I just want to say we are fully human. Men, women, everyone. We have the ability to be masculine, feminine, and everything in between and everything and beyond, okay? It's just very stressful if you feel like you have to stick to one coping mechanism. If it's a coping mechanism, you're not living your full potential. It's not wrong. So at the other end of being or acting like one of the guys, there is the ideal girl. Now, the ideal girl is someone who has more of the feminine traits. Yeah? So she really values empathy. She values collaboration. She values listening. But what happens in that heroic leadership culture, she finds herself also being diminished. She's too soft, and being soft, that's not a good thing. She tends to avoid confrontation, focusing on maintaining good relationships, and with that remains small. That's why I use the word girl. Not because she is, but because she keeps herself small. Before the words come out of her mouth, she already says, maybe not the right time, maybe it's not a good question, maybe not now. Okay? So these women in the heroic model, and I'm telling that the whole time. So I hope after this talk you start noticing and seeing it tomorrow and the day after what kind of model you work in. Then you hear people say, "Oh, you're not visible enough." Yeah, you're not visible enough, or too soft, or oh, she doesn't make the quick decisions, you know. Or in Dutch we have a saying. It says, it sounds weird in English, but you know, you have to, you know, slap your fist a bit more often, or stand your ground. Yeah, can you do that? And my question is always, is that the kind of leadership you really want more of? Again, that's why I'm counting on you. Because we have too many leaders who are trying to put you, us, me, women, back in that old traditional model, which is not helpful for anyone, especially not for agile transformations. Okay, so this is then what happens in my own mind. I have my ideal girl, and I have my strong man fighting in my head, thinking about what's the best strategy for now. The best strategy is not neither of them, because it's a coping mechanism. And from a coping mechanism, I'm never giving my best. I'm not living my full potential. Once again, it's not that either or the other one, it's wrong. Yeah? It's not that being one of the guys or being an ideal girl or everything that can be sit in between, that it is wrong. No, you can use them as it fits. It's only wrong when it limits your potential. Okay? So, what are then the key areas to focus on when you want to develop more of your, I would say, your personal leadership? The personal leadership you want to bring in your organization so it moves, so you help the culture to evolve into a more agile culture, instead of sticking to what's already there. There are 3 things that we can learn from women's leadership that I want to bring to the table today. The first thing is that we really need to understand our own coping mechanisms. Yeah? So how have we been shaped in the companies and the leaders that we've worked for? How does it influence our own behavior? How does it limit our own behavior? And that we really stop suppressing these beautiful qualities that we have, qualities that I now have a new name for, post-heroic, but these beautiful leadership traits that make organizations so much more better and so much more fun and so much more productive to work in. So, being aware first. The second thing is we have to tame our inner critic. I will later move to all these 3 and then you go to work. Yeah. The second one, tame your inner critic. You know the inner critic? That's that voice in your own mind judging everything you do. Keeps your mouth shut if you're not careful. Yeah. For women, it's often overcoming a perfectionist voice, saying that it's never good enough, whatever they've thought about, think about, made. And it keeps you in self-doubt. So we need to build the confidence, the presence, to really own the kind of leader that you are and that you want to bring into the world. Tame that inner critic. That's the second step. And the third step is that we also allow ourselves to really embrace the broader kind of influencing strategies than only the strategic part. Yeah? So the main influence strategy at the top of organizations is through business plans, business cases, which is called the strategic influencing strategy. But there are so many more. Okay. Now you are getting back to work. I think you've done enough listening for today. So I'm just going to give you, let's say 5 minutes with your neighbor, just one-on-one, okay? You're going to talk for about 5 minutes about what do you recognize, if you have ever found yourself in such a coping mechanism, and if you have never thought about, great, okay? Then you do for the first time. Talk about 5 minutes. What's your coping mechanism? Is there actually a prize that you win with it? Like, okay, if I am dealing with it well, I am getting more recognition, or I'm getting a more promotion. There is something in it why you You have this mechanism. But there's also a price that you pay. There's a price you pay. It might be with your authenticity, it might be with your energy, it might be with your confidence. There's a price you pay when you adapt too much, okay? Okay, go. 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, final sentences. Then we go on. So, can I just maybe hear one or two reflections on, what you spoke about, or an insight you had, or what you came across when talking with your neighbor? Someone want to share? Thank you. Yes, please.
Maybe now.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't want to stop talking to Eric, first of all. It's a very nice man I have here. But we talked a lot about being holistic as a leader, to actually approach your a coworker with interest and genuine interest of the person you're actually meeting, not just what that person does or the outcome that he or she is giving.
Beautiful. Yeah. Nice. Thank you very much. One more reflection? What did you spoke about? That maybe some of the men have discovered something around coping mechanisms. I'm very curious now that I have you here in the room. Who's aware of a coping mechanism? Thank you.
Dank u wel.
Ja, alsjeblieft.
So, a bit of a sidestep maybe, but it's also interesting here how the male is always the norm. Like how you put these two categories of one of the guys or the nice girl as in comparison to the male.
Yeah.
And a bit of our discussion ended up around this topic about like good leadership, but it's always kind of compared to the default male patriarchal kind of leadership.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Also like to put it in perspective of what's called feminist leadership, which is a concept from ActionAid, which is it's a different topic, but I think the reflection is somewhere in like we need to change our lenses. Thank you.
Yeah. That the default is different also. What we compare us to. Yeah. 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 So of course for we'd say minority groups, although it doesn't feel that way, but for in a lot of environments when you're the minority, you look at what's the default. Yeah. And that's also very limiting. And you have to free yourself. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, the environment you work in and how you have been shaped impacts our inner critic. And that's a voice we all have as human beings because we have consciousness. So it's not something you can erase or you want to get rid of. Not necessary. But it is a voice that is actually developed in childhood, meant to keep you safe. It's not a voice that really helps you live the biggest, most fabulous, amazing life, or to help you be a different kind of person in an environment with all specific types of people. And this voice tells you, I think, Carla, it would be more safe if we move up a little bit here and let's try to be accepted, okay? Don't do so weird. That's the role of the inner critic. Perfect. As long as you don't let your life be ruled by it. As long as you don't let your leadership be ruled by it. So taming the inner critic, how you do that is that you first become aware, what is actually the voice in my head? What does he or she, how does it feel, tell me? What do I often hear in my head? And is that really a helpful voice? A helpful voice is often loving. It's compassionate. It's a voice that you would also use to your child or to your friend. Yeah? An inner critic voice often has the words you should or you ought to have. So there is a lot of push in it. It's never good enough. You should have done more, should have done better. Are you sure? An inner critic, often you can even feel it in your body. It often makes you a bit cramped, harnessed. Yeah. And when you're in a more loving, compassionate space, you feel also more spacious to explore, to ask questions, to work with different kinds of people. You don't feel threatened that often. Yeah. Okay. So in the inner critic also feeds the imposter syndrome. You know what that is? Imposter syndrome. Yeah. So men, women, we all have that. It's that sense that you are almost about to be exposed as really not competent enough. Yeah. So if you haven't done a lot of work on your inner critic and you are in an environment where in the inside you feel very different than from apparently the default or the standard, that really feeds a lot of the inner critic. And the imposter syndrome. Now, what we often tend to do is that we focus on building new skills. Another, I think in your language, you would do another programming language or something, yeah, to learn. Or another agile coaching education. And so you will build on more skills, more frameworks, more tools to really help you become more at ease with yourself. But that's not the way to deal with an inner critic, because for an inner critic, it is never enough, never, ever, ever. Dealing with an inner critic has to do with your sense of self. Yeah. Who am I? Having a sense of self-worth, self-confidence. I am good enough. I'm allowed to be. What I bring to the table is valuable. Okay, so how much more time do I have? A few more minutes, okay. Then you do this at lunch, okay? You with Eric talk about, because what I wanted to ask is become a bit more aware of how that voice in your head sounds like. I've given myself, her, in my head somewhere, she lives here, a name. She's called Mrs. Perfect. That's the one I have in my mind. It's never enough. It's never enough, yeah? So I have to do my sheets 10 times over again, and then I'm telling her, no, we are done now, okay? I have to keep her calm, otherwise I am never, never, ever good enough. So maybe you will figure that one out together during lunch. Okay, and then my final one is that I just wanted to give you the sense of all the other kind of leadership styles that you can work on while working in your agile transformations. Now, the top three: strategic, vision, also called the visionary leadership style, the courageous leadership styles, very result-oriented, and the coaching leadership styles, being more in the Scrum Master or roles, the Agile Coach roles. Those are really accepted. But actually, the bottom four, which gives you really the sense of collaboration, the sense of empathy, really seeing people, there are so much more influencing strategies possible. So we have all the stuff that really helps the visionary, the courageous, and the grounded style to really flourish. But the bottoms are the most difficult ones to show, to expose in the more traditional organizations, yeah? Because being inspiring and having a radiant energy or warmth, yeah, or being really focused on connectivity, really being focused on what you mentioned, on who is behind this person, except for the task. Being caring for people, doing what's right instead of what has to be done. No? Doing the right thing. Okay. These are all influencing strategies that we can really use to create more and more productive and more beautiful, I would say, organizations to work for. So now, my final tip is, if you don't want to be bothered with self-reflection and developing a broader range of influencing strategies and tame your inner critic, etc., if you're like, too much work for me, then I have one golden rule. If you apply it tomorrow, you're done also, okay? Then you just not only empower more women, but you put more women in power, then you're done also. Thank you very much.
We have time for a few questions.
No. Thank you for raising a very important question. At our company, we actually are 50-50 men, women in management. In C-level, I think it's 60% women. And actually in the IT department, I think we're 4 out of 5 managers are women. However, this has gotten me thinking, do you see any future challenges if we were to go towards 100% of company managers being women?
For me personally, that I would find it boring. I would miss a bit of the spark, you know. I mean, there are also environments. For instance, now we see it a lot at primary schools. Why would we ever want to do that? Because everyone wants to be seen, yeah. And it's helpful if we have men, women, different background, different colors, different types. If we just have so much more of diversity into the table. So I would not argue that we want only all women. You know, I find it a hard time that my son is around only a lot of women in school, and he needs a bit of the pushback. So it's different kinds also, yeah?
Yeah. Do you also see this risk?
If it's a risk, well, not in the coming, I would say, 200 years. Yeah, you know, actually, I know your country's doing well, but the rest of the world, we are really moving backwards instead of making progress. Yeah?
Agree. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
There. Thank you so much, Carla. I was sitting here thinking a little about, besides gender, if we think about a generational change in leadership as well, just as you started with with playing the game, changing the game, and so on. But now we have a whole lot of newer generations bringing in separate values and behaviors and stuff like that. Do you have any comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah. You also need to really have some experience to base the decisions upon. Yeah. So for the younger generation, being really empowered and having space to make your own decision and to make your own mistakes and to really, you know, experiment is very important. What's also important is that when you grow into your responsibility, yeah, and you have 100 people that you also have to be able to feel responsible for and take responsibility on. We cannot all put that in the hands of people with just 2, 3, 4 years of working experience. Yeah, so I think the conversation there is very important, and creating a space for much younger people to really, you know, give me some breathing space here. They leave. That's why they all leave the corporate cultures, and probably your organization, I think, or some other firms can really benefit from it. Yeah, so that's it. Okay. So, well, I'm here for a lunch, so we can also would love to hear some of your reflection or your questions over lunch. Okay.